What's good, everybody? My name is Dawkins. Welcome to season 4 of Stage Dive. For those of you who've been listening, you know that the podcast traditionally has been about tips and tricks that make great performances on stage. How to prepare, how to rehearse, how to navigate an audience. But this season, I feel like we've leaned more into a new category, which is the origin story of all of these artists. How did each of these performers become the person, the performer, the artist that they are today? How did they go from zero to getting on stage? And how do they navigate all of the bumps and twists and turns that make the creative journey both beautiful and really challenging? I was blown away by all of our guests this season, and I really, really hope you enjoy this. Today we have Jessica Cox, and she has a story unlike any other we've ever told on Stage Dive. Jessica was born without arms and uses her feet to do everything she needs to in life, including being one of the first commercially licensed pilots who uses her feet. She can drive, she can open things, she can do basically everything you would need to in life with only her feet. And truthfully, that's only part of the story. We dive deep into what it was like emotionally for her, particularly as a young girl, to go through being so different from everyone all the time. This was such a powerful conversation. I'm grateful she shared her time with us. Please enjoy my conversation with Jessica. Jessica, good morning. So lovely to have you here. My first question for you is, what brought you to New Jersey today?
Well, I'm actually here in New Jersey because of an amazing group of volunteers. An Experimental Aviation Association has taken on the challenge of making and building an airplane for me. I am the world's first armless pilot, and we have a kit airplane. Kits are built all over the country, but a kit plane has been given to my foundation, and there's a group of volunteers from the EAA chapter here in Toms River, New Jersey, that have taken it upon themselves, led by Bob Newman, to build this airplane for me, which is really a dream come true. It's amazing. It'll be the very first airplane in aviation history that can be flown with feet alone. So the left pilot and command seat will be customized for my foot controls.
Amazing.
I know it's almost unbelievable at times when I think about it because first of all, it's a big undertaking to put a kit together. It can take anywhere from 3 to 4 years to a decade. Some people say that you usually build one airplane a lifetime. That's how
Mm.
involved it is to put an airplane together. But this amazing team here has built a number of planes, and specifically the plane that we're looking to build, they have had experience building. So it's exciting adventure.
Yeah. I'm really curious. Like, I'm going to guess that when you took your first flying lesson, trying to imagine that someone would have dedicated years of their life to creating an aircraft specifically for you might have been hard to imagine. Like, what does it feel like to be sitting here today, knowing that you started at zero, as we all do in whatever it is that we're pursuing, and have now made it to a point where these amazing things are happening for you?
It's really hard to believe. I believe in this law of attraction. If you put something out there, it's amazing how the world shifts in a way to manifest this amazing idea. And if you work hard towards it, if you have people that help you attain that goal, um, incredible things will happen, things that you would never imagined. And it has been the case since I decided to take that first flight lesson. Unknowingly, I was jumping into a world of this community of aviators, people who love aviation, people who fly planes, people who build planes, and the whole industry is incredible. And so it's really hard to believe how far I've come since 15 years ago when I first became a sport pilot.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm curious, like where you are at in your life and your career now. There's momentum, there's attraction, there's all these things bubbling. Like, not only did your career sort of, I imagine, have to go through an evolution where you started with little attention, little fanfare, again, as we all do, but also like when you were growing up, like, did you always have this sort of possibility mentality, or like where did that come from? Where did those seeds start to get planted as you were growing up?
I like that you ask about the possibility mentality or the growth mindset that many people think about. And I actually have a way to think about it, and I call it the how to do new. And it's a methodology for realizing that you can achieve something in a very unique and creative way. And it started for me as early as like when I was a kid on the playground learning how to tie my shoelaces.
Mm.
And one of those things I had to learn is that I wasn't able to learn how to tie my laces the same way other kids tied their laces. They watch their teacher. The teacher demonstrates with grabbing hold of the laces with their hands and fingers, which I didn't have fingers and hands to begin with. So obviously, I made this connection with my toes and my feet because they were there and they substituted my fingers and hands. And if I had my feet inside the shoe, I wouldn't be able to tie my laces. So unlike everyone else, I took both feet out of the shoe, tied the laces from the outside, and then I slipped my foot in. And that whole think outside the shoe approach is the way that I have seen everything in my life. Because I had no other choice but to see things differently because I was living in a world built for arms and hands. But it is now truly a gift in teaching others how to do new.
Yeah. Um, how would you describe your relationship to feeling different?
Feeling different is not the best experience in the world as a young person. I'll just make sure that's very clear because while as an adult you can definitely put a positive spin on it, and it's everything for me. It's my branding, it's the way I'm able to have authority on stage, it's the reason that I can get attention in press. So everything about it is shaping my profession on a daily basis. But as a young person, being different is isolating at times, it's alienating, it's uh feeling like you're the only one, like no one understands you, like why me, the question why me, is something that you deal with on a regular basis. And you start to look around the world and people don't always understand you. And as a powerless child, it's very difficult because people are putting labels on you like, oh, you can't do it. You don't have arms. You'll never be able to achieve that. And that is very difficult. And I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. But coming and rising above that and the maturity that you have to develop to be able to overcome that is such wisdom that I don't know, I think that the difficulties is what helps provide that is this realization, for me it's even more difficult than learning to fly a plane with my feet and becoming the world's first armless pilot was this challenge of rising above the being different and being confident in my difference and that empowerment that comes with it. And that for me is what I'm even most proud of is because that emotional aspect of it all is even more difficult than some of those physical things that people think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, when you look back, do you have any fond memories of a time when a classmate or a peer of yours made you feel really seen or accepted or appreciated for your differences?
So part of my everyday message is how we can make strides to making people feel accepted, how we can be inclusive in creating an accepting environment. And one of those things is those individuals who make the daily effort of make it an effort to do something to make someone feel included. And for me, that was what meant everything in the world to me as a young person. That one classmate who stood out, who said something that either stood up for me because someone was being mean or made me feel included. And I remember one of these small little things that someone said to me was, as in middle school, it's even harder to be different. It's multiplied by like, it's 10 times harder to be different when you're in middle school, when you're looking for affirmation from others and acceptance and blending in. You don't want to stand out. You just want to be like all the other students. And I couldn't feel any more different because of my difference. And one of the times I was in my math class, I remember getting up, moving on to the next period, and a girl came in my class, and someone who was fairly popular, pretty um, confident about herself, and she said, "Oh, you have braces now." And I was expecting some kind of commentary, about my braces that was going to be negative, and she said, "Well, welcome to the club." And that
Mm,
welcome to the club was all it took that made my day, that sense of acceptance, that sense of being a part of something
mm.
that gave me real affirmation in myself.
Yeah. Absolutely. I will confess, this is a selfish question. So I have a 5.5-year-old daughter, and I don't believe she has any right now, but I imagine, as inevitably will, she'll interact with someone who has a difference, and whether it be physical, racial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, as someone who walked through that experience, like, what advice would you offer either to children or to parents to help, again, continue to create that inclusive environment?
I always say, treat the person the way you would want to be treated. And it's just, I mean, something we've all been told as far back as we can remember, being told by our parents, treat them the way you want to be treated, being told by parents, teachers, and adults in our lives, because that means all the difference. When someone sees someone who's different and really focuses in on the difference instead of making them feel like they're very much similar in many ways. That uh, that similarity is what I think connects people. And so it's important that when you do see someone who's different, is to recognize they're a human being first before they are anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'll ask a very specific question. Do you feel like it's better for, and I appreciate it's unfair of me to ask you to speak for all people. So I will ask you to speak for yourself. Do you prefer it if someone almost pretends like everything is exactly the same? Or would you rather they actually ask you, like, what can I do to help you feel included or uninhibited, unimpeded in this space?
I think it really depends on the situation. There are a lot of times when the question, how can I help you, is more empowering than just thinking, everything's okay.
Mm,
Because sometimes people don't always feel like they want to articulate their needs, and being asked the question is always an empowering way to make someone feel included. How can I best help you? But first, not making the assumption and instead asking the question.
mm,
And that's what's powerful about communication, is it establishes empowering both the person being asked and the one who is asking the question. Because if you make the assumption, oh, they must need help, or they probably we need to do something, again, that's coming from a place of assuming instead of saying, um, what is the best way to go about this?
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Inevitably, kids come up to me and ask, "What happened?" This is what happens when you don't eat your veggies. The number one question is still, how do you wipe? Here's the secret. I don't actually take the toilet paper off the roll, it just makes it really gross for the next person. That's a gross one, yeah. When my husband and I go to a restaurant, people think that he's probably going to feed me. So to mess with them, I pick up a fork and start to feed him. Soup is the most impressive. One time a waitress asked my husband, "What does she want to order?" He's like, "She's missing arms, not a brain." She's like, "Then why are you eating at this crummy place?" I remember one time I drove through a fast food place, went to the first window to pay for my food, made it to the second window to pick up my food, and the entire staff was standing there to see me. And they still forgot my burrito supreme. Thank you so much, and this has been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Come on, girl. Come on, girl. You are incredible.
Thank you
You are
so
incredible.
much.
Oh my gosh. Girl, you're incredible. Okay, so here's at least 7 things you taught us. And we're gonna go out and get the book, because we know you're gonna be out there signing the book, Disarm Your Limits, okay? So at least 7 things you taught us. Think outside the shoe. Did you guys get it? Face our fears. Is that okay? Tell me if you got it. You got it? Be persistent. Be the person God created you to be. Be willing to try something new. Tell your kids they can do anything. And drink a shot glass of desire. Girl, you're awesome. Love you, girl. Come on. Come on. Love you, baby.
Thank
All
you.
right. Let's give it up again one more time for Jessica. Oh, amazing. Amazing.
When you were younger, did you have an inclination toward performance? Was that something bubbling up in you?
I actually remember watching as a 5-year-old girl, and my dad did a Army soldier show. So my dad worked on base, and he was in charge of music and the arts, and he did a show. And I still remember being in awe, seeing him there in the spotlight, conducting and being a part of this huge performance. And I was then exposed to the stage as young as 6 years old for my first dance recital. And I didn't want to be in the recital because I was just terrified, and I knew that people were going to stare at me, and having all the lights in your face and all the people who are seeing my difference. But then I was encouraged by my mom to go out and perform. And my dance teacher said there wasn't going to be a back row, so I couldn't really hide behind anyone. I had to be right in the one row that was in front of all the lights. And when I went out, I performed, and I heard the first round of applause, and there was this surge of confidence that came uh, from that round of applause. And then the next round of applause. And then finally, it was the time for me to walk off stage. And I didn't want to get off stage because there was just so much great feeling from being there and having the round of applause, doing my routine. And I went back to my mom and I said, Mom, when can I go back on stage and perform? And that was my first stage experience. It was at the age of 6. And I couldn't wait to get back on, and had dance recitals every summer after that.
Cool, cool. Did you explore anything beyond dance, or was it always dance?
I did a little bit of everything, I think, typical of, most people going to maybe choir concerts,
Mm.
drama sometimes, a little bit of everything, I would say. A lot of competition in Taekwondo, and that is almost like a performance when you have judges around you. And definitely those years early on have prepared me now for my full-time career every single day, which I'm getting ready this week to speak 5 times in front of audiences over the course of the next 6 days. And it's really empowering. It gives me a lot of affirmation as well, and it empowers others, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm curious, like, how did your father being on a military base affect you when you were growing up?
Because I lived so close to a military base, it really exposed me to the world. People were coming who'd lived in
Mm.
Germany, and they were in my classes. My best friends in school were sometimes moved throughout the year, so sometimes I saw them, and then other times they had to move with their family because their family was assigned to another base. So I really got to see and hear the stories and become very worldly in that respect because many families from the military life were representative in my school, in my friends, in my circle, in my community.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and this is just another personal curiosity. Like, how would you describe the role of music and art in the military? I don't think I've ever considered that, but it sounds like that was what your dad specifically cared for.
It was so important, but unfortunately he got downsized.
Mm.
And I don't, obviously not everyone believed in its importance, but
Mm.
I can be a definitely advocate for how important that is, that people need that way to appreciate the arts and share that in a community.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, when did you start doing Taekwondo?
So I practiced Taekwondo since I was 10, and I was probably, what, fourth or fifth grade around that time. And my mom went into a school and said, well, I was wondering if my daughter could start Taekwondo with her brother and sister. However, my middle daughter, she doesn't have arms, and I was wondering if that's going to be okay. And the instructor said, well, as under one condition, as long as she has a good attitude. And that began this journey to now a hobby that I am still a part of. It's the reason I met my husband.
Mm.
And every single week I go to Taekwondo classes, even now as an adult, twice a week sometimes. And for me, it's just a wonderful outlet. It helps me with flexibility. It helps me with fitness. I don't know what I would do without it.
Yeah. Um, I promise this is going somewhere. How much do you associate Taekwondo with like combat or fighting?
Well, Taekwondo is known for being a martial art with a lot of emphasis on kicks. And that was just perfectly fitting for me because I have legs and they're very strong legs. And I used to really express myself through kicks. And unfortunately, my brother and sister took the blunt of that. But my
Tough.
mom didn't realize it, but it was healthy putting me in a martial art. So it really got me to channel it in a very positive way. Um, as far as its relation to your self-defense is what I think you're probably going. Is that what your question is? Is how does it connect to?
Like self-defense is definitely an interesting angle. I think I'm more so like something that comes up for a lot of artists. We're an emotional folk. We have a lot of stuff that bubbles up. And so there's a question of what are the different ways you can find a healthy channel or outlet for whether it be maybe it's aggression, maybe it's anger, maybe it's sadness. And like, I think the United States today has a lot of violence broadly defined. And so I think there's a lot of language around like, we shouldn't be violent, we shouldn't fight, we shouldn't hit, we shouldn't do these things. And I have a curiosity when you look at Eastern traditions like Taekwondo, like karate, like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, from a different place, obviously. Like those are proving to be a really healthy way for people to be physically engaged with one another, to be in combat and do it in a way that is healthy and, dare I say, loving. And so
Hmm.
that's really my curiosity. Like I hope it has provided you some sense of safety through self-defense, but really I'm wondering like, what is your relationship to feeling more confident, more strong, more powerful in your body, able to physically interact with someone in a way that is not just affection, that is like healthily competitive. Let's try that.
Hmm. Oh, it's definitely huge. One of the things when I first started Taekwondo, and this is just probably because I was afraid of falling. I didn't have arms,
Mm,
obviously, to catch myself. So a lot of times my eye level would drop. And I would always look at my feet. I would look down. And maybe during this interview, at times you see me looking down. And it was just my natural way of adapting to ensure that I was always grounded and I didn't fall and trip and hurt myself because of the inability to catch my falls. And my instructor would always, like, year after year after year, would say, bring your eye level up. You need to be, just look out. And finally, it started to really have an effect on me so I could bring my eye level up. And with that, I brought this like boost in confidence. So it was a wonderful way to channel my insecurities and definitely get through those insecurities through martial arts. And also, like you mentioned, being positive with our body and having that confidence in the way we move. And that has been tremendous for me. I mean, my balance for one is exceptional compared to the average person because I have to have the ability to stand on one leg because one of my other leg and foot acts as my hand and arm. So
mm,
standing on one leg all the time is just a regular thing. So it helped with balance, it helped with confidence, it helped with bringing my eye level up so that I can look out, and that in itself was self-defense enough, being aware and of surroundings. So overall, it just had, and from the very beginning, just being able to channel the anger I had because a lot of times kids who are born with some difference or disability, it's either it comes out in a way of either sometimes depression or
mm,
anger. And for me, I dealt with a lot of anger. And
mm.
so for me, again, the Taekwondo was a way for me to have an outlet.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's awesome. Um, how would you describe yourself as a person when you were graduating from high school?
As a person, when I was graduating high school, I would say I was probably very quiet. I was just into myself a lot of sometimes withdrawn at times. And college was my opportunity to really find myself and find my
Mm,
voice. Um, in my senior most magazine, which is kind of similar to the yearbook, but the seniors get their own magazine, the Senior Most magazine. I was given the title Most Quiet. And so I was thinking to myself, that's not me, but
Mm.
that's what my classmates thought of me. And obviously, I was pretty quiet and withdrawn for the most part. But then I got to college, and it was finally my opportunity to start to find my voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't 100% know how to word this, but I'll find my way through it. Like, it's one thing if someone acknowledges that you are different than them in a way that you can tangibly be like, yes, I don't have arms, you have arms. We are different in that way. I think it's another thing entirely when someone says, oh, you're quiet, and inside you have a knowing it's like, I'm not. That's
Yeah,
not who I am. Like,
yeah.
can you describe? Maybe it's not even a difference thing, but kind of what it felt like to navigate having people perceive you in one way and having a deeper knowing that you are actually a very different person and trusting that deeper knowing.
Wow, that's a powerful question. I don't think I've ever received that because that takes some reflection. That's a very powerful question because I felt like that was very much of my everyday for those years through middle school, through high school.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, even today, occasionally people doubt what's possible for someone without arms, and on a regular basis going out in public, people think a certain way, but I have a belief of who I am and who I am in the world, so that regardless of how that person perceives me, I'm resilient. And that hasn't always been the case because as a young person, I used to get really overwhelmed with that being different, being
Mm.
stared at, going out to public places, and it would just really like wear on me to the point of uh exhaustion. That's how I can put it, is it sometimes it was just so exhausting to be out in the public eye and have to have to have to defend myself against so many perceptions, misperceptions, or so what I felt were misperceptions. Maybe they weren't all misperceptions, but in my interpretation of it, it was. And I realized that I can really rise above that and put out to the world how I want the world to see me. And it made this huge, huge shift to a point where I can go out anywhere in a public space and I enjoy being in places where people don't know me and I'm a stranger, and I can be a spectacle at times and enjoy every bit of it because of the fact
Mm.
that I can put out that energy and put out that sense of self that no one can really argue with. That people would see, I'm standing on one leg and making a purchase at a grocery store, and people say that I'm doing that without arms, and some of them they're standing there with their jaws dropped, like how is this woman living the normal life without arms? And they're just truly trying to take it in. But I give them the space to take it in and understand that sometimes that comes with misperception, sometimes it comes with confusion or fear or anxiety or pity, but that doesn't have to bother me, that I can
Mm.
continue to put out that positivity. And in most situations, it will actually make a switch for me. It'll make a switch for someone else so that they can give me the positive response that I actually prefer, as opposed to many, many years of dealing with what I thought was negative.
Mm.
But I had the control to give off a positive vibe.
Yeah. So I want to drill into that because I think that experience you're talking about is something that is like so profoundly admirable, and so impressive that you were able to make such a shift. And so, like, I just want to honor and celebrate you for making that transition because Lord knows you didn't have to. A lot of people don't. But I also know that a lot of people deeply, deeply seek to put out an energy that is reflective of themselves, that makes them feel, whether you want to call it like immune from either the criticism or the negativity or the watchful eye of others. So high school, you're they literally called you the most quiet, and you're like, nope, no, thank you, I'm not doing that. So like, where, how did you start to identify like, okay, if it's not that, then who am I, and what is the energy I want to start putting out into the world?
There have been so many things and occasions where it's um, pretty clear to me that how that transformation happened. And it was not a overnight thing by no means. It
For
was just
sure.
by any means. It was it was definitely a process. And that's the thing, is that not one particular thing is what made that shift for me. But there was a series of things that helped me to finally get to that point. I mean, one of them was deciding that no matter what people expected from me, that it was more important to be myself. And for 11 years in school, I wore prosthetic arms under this expectation that these prosthetics are necessary. That because I don't have arms, I therefore should be wearing what's available. I should be like everyone else. I should fulfill the expectation. And then one day I said, forget it, I'm done. And I was 14. I walked to the bus stop without them. It was the best decision of my life. And when the bus doors shut, that was it. I never put them back on again. And to this day, they're gathering dust in the closet. So that was one step. Another step was for me in my faith journey, because I just remember having a really bad day, and I was at a store. It was this public, one of these big like warehouse stores where you buy tons of things like Sam's Club or Costco. And I just remember being there right before a holiday, and so everyone was stocking up. Everyone and their mother was at the store, and it was just crowded. And I needed to locate my aunt because I was giving her a ride home that day. And I just remember going through the store, weaving through the aisles, and not finding her, and finally making it to the lines of people making their purchases. And as I was going up and down the lines looking for my aunt, this was the time she didn't have a cell phone. I mean, I was probably at a time when we had pagers, but she didn't have a pager. And here I am walking through trying to find her. And every time someone saw me walking up and down the cash register lines, which had to have been like 100-person long lines, everyone's head was turning. And it was like this domino effect as I was going through these lines. And it was just it was hitting me particularly in a way that day that was harder than ever. And it was a series of things to get to that point, a series of bad things that were happening. And then finally, I just said, I've had enough. This enough of this. I'm tired of being stared at. I'm tired of being different. I'm tired of this that comes with being who I am. And so I found this rack of clothing um, in the center of the store, and I just went behind the rack of clothing, and I just found myself hitting rock bottom and saying, God, why can't I just be normal? And it was just like I could barely pull myself back up. And I somehow managed to pull myself out of the store, and in the process, I found my aunt. I brought her home, but it was a very low for me. And then, I kid you not, a week later, I was at the same exact store. This time, I was pulled my car in. I was fueling up my car, which I do that independently. I grab the fuel hose with my right foot, and I hop on one leg over to the side of the car, and I plug in the hose, and I'm able to fuel my own car. And as I'm standing there, standing on one leg, trying to do all this balancing act, which is my norm, so it wasn't out of the ordinary for me, I feel someone's presence behind me. And I kind of turn around and look, and there's someone in my personal bubble, my space. And I'm kind of caught off guard because there's this guy standing there. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And I look up though, and our eyes meet, and I see that his eyes, he's tearing up, he's crying, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And he points over to his car about 2 fuel pumps over, and he says, you see over there in the car, my daughter is sitting there in the passenger seat. She is dealing with a lot right now. She lost 2 of her fingers in an accident, and she's been having a very hard time with it. But she watched you as you were fueling up your car, and she could not believe what you were doing, and it gave her this hope and inspiration that I haven't been able to give her. And just to experience that was a powerful aha moment of, okay, this is powerful. This could be a gift. This could either put myself in a very vulnerable position like I did a week ago at the store, or I could move forward in a positive way. And that helped me make a shift, that I had an impact that could touch people in a way that maybe not everyone has.
Yeah. I think being of service to others is a wildly underrated cure for a lot of what we don't like about ourselves. Because when you're in your own bubble of like, I suck, I can't do it, choose their 17 and 18 versions of how you might say that to yourself. and suddenly you realize that you have an opportunity to make someone smile, to lift someone up, to encourage them, to inspire them. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like I'm not useless. Like I
Yeah.
have something that I can offer to this world. Um, that's beautiful. I have a question that's probably inappropriate, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, is do you have a favorite thing that you do out in the world that like just has people like completely agog and just staring at you like I can't believe she does that? Like whether it's groceries or getting gas, is there like one of them where you feel like a little extra good about yourself when you're able to pull it off?
Um, yeah, there are a few things. Uh, I'm not one to love that type of attention seeking, but there are a few things that do catch people off guard. I think it's like when I'm using chopsticks in a restaurant and they're like over there fumbling with chopsticks with their own fingers, and then there I am using between my big toe and third toe, grabbing a hold of the chopsticks and eating just fine. I like that extra bit of attention that I get that challenges people.
That's amazing. Um, are you equally good with both feet, or do you have a preferred foot?
I'm very dominant on my right. So my right foot is my dominant foot, and so that's why my website's rightfooted.com.
There you
Everything,
go.
my foundation is right-footed. It's helping people get on the right foot and also my foot dominance.
That makes a ton of sense. Um, this is a weird question you don't have to answer. Like, do you experience any like imbalance in your hips or your back?
I was just talking about that this morning because I woke up with like my hips and I'm like I haven't had such I mean my hips haven't been a problem until like recently, and I think it's
Mm,
because they're constantly being used
yes.
that my lower body is like probably much stronger than the average person my age because of the constant use. And my feet, because they're not only walking for me, but they're also doing all the dexterous things I need to do to function in the world, they tend to get overused. So having foot massages is important, getting pedicures is really important. And
Mm,
I even have arthritis in my toes and feet. Sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and from all that swelling from laying down, I'll wake up and stand on my feet and they're actually painful
mm.
from the arthritis. And I just have to get circulation going to rid that pain. So, yes, it does come at a cost using my feet as my hands, and not only doing that, but they're double duty because they're my feet as well.
Right, right. Which are already doing plenty. Um, yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. Um, so you're having this journey, you have this moment, and I think you said Costco or Sam's Club of like, God,
Mhm.
this is the worst. And then there's like the redemptive arc of like, wait, like there's something to the way that I'm living and learning that is a source of inspiration and power to other people. When did you decide like I'm going to really take my story and I'm going to put it out in the world? I'm going to start getting on stages. I'm going to start being a performer.
Well, I first had an experience in high school as a sophomore when I was invited to speak to the middle school's class, and this particular class was, I mean, I hate the label of that they always give these particular students who have a lot more challenges stacked against them. So I won't use that. I'll just say that, these were students who had maybe more challenges than the average person at the school. So they were gathered together for their group, and I just remember coming in to speak to them, and somehow something struck a chord for many of them because afterwards they were telling me how they gained inspiration. Of course, this is my normal, so I didn't think anything of it, but for them, bringing that to my attention really started to light this fire that, wow, if they took away that from this, me simply just telling them about my everyday, then it could be a gift that can be used more often than just this one-off event where I'm speaking to the middle school students. So I think it started there and the flame just kind of grew and grew, and then now uh well, it was after college when I was ready to take on that next chapter in life. I had my degree. What's next? Do I go for a master's? Do I go for further education, or do I just get out to the workforce? And I was not going to do any more education. I was done with that.
Mm-hmm.
I was ready to go out there and just be who I am, and that was where the motivational speaking career, being an entrepreneur in that space, was an invitational uh, experience I had from a few invitations I got around the city, and I decided let's just take this global, and it's just continuing now, many years later, to take me around the world, to have experiences, to meet people, to have an impact on thousands of people at a time. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, those are some things you love about speaking. What do you not like about speaking?
Well, one of the things that speaking requires is a lot of travel, and
Mm,
I love to see the world, especially when I don't get to see these places normally.
yeah.
So it takes me to places just everywhere. It's wonderful, wonderful experiences, and I'm a foodie, so it gives me different chances to try different things. I go to countries I wouldn't go to otherwise. But there is a lot of challenge with that physically on your body when you're traveling a lot, especially when you go back home and you want to get back into a fitness routine
Hmm.
and say you're on a different time zone. So it's takes a lot. It takes a toll on the body if you want to keep a fitness routine, or any kind of routine for that matter, because you're always going, and the next gig could be here, there, wherever, and it's all over the place. And there's a sense of adventure to that, but at times also it's hard to keep anything routine at home.
Yeah.
And it's always the ongoing challenge of having any business. You're always adapting and figuring out how to how to do new, just like my saying goes. It's really adapting to the world of how I can be of service to others.
Mm, yeah. Um, something I've been thinking about a lot lately is community. And community, for better or worse, by definition, was defined geographically. You could only really build community with the people you were near, because how else would you actually interact with them? Now there's a million and one ways to define how you build community, how you maintain community. And so I'm curious, like, what the answer you just gave resonates a lot. And like, it sounds like, I mean, you have someone who just built you a plane. You clearly have a robust community of people who know you and support you and help you do all this travel and all this speaking, which is beautiful. Do you feel a craving or a yearning for like what I would call old school community of like your neighbors, you know, the people who are in the same school district, the people you see at the gym every week? Like, do you miss that?
You know, I feel like I have a lot of people in my life who keep me grounded, and having that core group
Mm,
allows me to not necessarily miss it as much as maybe someone who doesn't have the core group of people that can help and keep you grounded. Um, and so, yes, but then again, there's also the community that comes with being able to be in contact with anyone around the world.
mhm,
I have created a community of women who literally were born without arms. And it sounds like it's rare, but it's not as rare as you think. And in this community,
mm,
it's someone from Canada, someone from the Midwest, someone from Texas, someone from another country. And it's just like because of that amazing reach, we have our own community, something that would otherwise not be.
mhm,
And it's so special to have that common ground.
mm.
And I mean, that's really incredible, remarkable.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, naming favorites is always hard. Can you name one of or some of the places you've traveled that you've most enjoyed, or maybe that were most surprised by?
I think one of my first trips to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia was a pretty spectacular trip because I didn't realize how nice people were there. And it was from
Mm,
the moment I got on the airline, I think it was Malaysian Airlines, that the seats were all colored like it was floral and bright. And then getting to the country and landing in Kuala Lumpur, and these people just greet you with such love and respect, and they're so incredibly nice. And then not only that, but then the cuisine was like a mixture of all the Asian countries together in one space. And I was like, whoa, this is an amazing buffet, eclectic group of flavors. And it was just wonderful having that experience. That was one of my first favorite experiences was Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
cool, very cool. Um, starting from a couple of invitations in the city, now speaking all over the world, how would you describe the way that sort of like your approach, and I imagine that's both like in how you prepare before you give a talk, what the talk actually looks like how would you say the way that you as a speaker present on stage has evolved over that time?
Well, I have definitely evolved significantly since I first started speaking. I think as a beginner speaker, and this is probably something everyone experiences, is you really get caught up in the notes and
Mm.
making sure you're saying certain things and covering all those bullets that you had outlined for weeks and weeks and almost having a rehearsed, memorized execution. But what I've realized is that presence is more important than anything. And when I had the chance to get on stage in front of thousands of people, that moment will never ever be again. So I have to really embrace this as when my true presence of who I am, when people are there being who they are. And if something happens, adjust what I'm going to say according to what has happened that morning or something that happened in the audience. I have to be open to that. And thinking on your feet like that is very uncomfortable at first. You feel very vulnerable if you're being ultimately present for someone on stage, uh, being there in your true form, being authentic. But it is so amazing how you can connect so much better. And it's connection. That's what it is when you're on stage speaking with people. It's not always about making sure all the points are covered. Did I say what I wanted to say when I prepared my speech a week ago? Did all the get through all the bullets? That is just being in your brain. And that is not what you want. You want to be there also with your heart,
Mhm.
and being present is what I have to remind myself every time I walk on stage.
Mm. Can you describe your relationship to vulnerability?
It's definitely not something that I have always been open to. Vulnerability, I think everyone has a certain level of protection that they have created in their own life to for their own sense of, so they don't get hurt or so that they can protect themselves. And I think vulnerability is something that we all have battled with. And I mean, I have my own stories of being vulnerable on stage, and not only that, but being vulnerable as a businesswoman and as a brand. That has been hard to really uncover because there's so many layers and layers and layers of protection that we like to put on our lives. And the truth is, the more authentic we can be, the more powerful we can be. And so, even today, after many, many years of discovery and reflection, I still have to make sure and remind myself that vulnerability and authenticity is more important than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you define authenticity?
I feel authenticity is being comfortable in your own skin despite the threat of any form of rejection,
Mm,
and being fearless.
awesome. Um, I don't know. This is a weird question. We'll find out. Do you, and I mean, the answer might be hiding in how you describe the way you're perceived in high school. Do you think people have a general assumption of how someone who is born without arms will be? Do you feel like there's a projection on the type of person you're supposed to be because you've gone through what you've gone through?
I don't think there's a projection of how someone should be. I think naturally there's a lot more, um, there are more challenges, and people may initially just see the physicality and the some of those things, the day to day, but in reality, the more difficult things are the emotional things. And I
Mm,
don't know if everyone is keen to understanding that until they maybe are really close to someone. So some of those things get overlooked.
yeah.
And ultimately, I think that people want to be accepted and loved for who they are. And when you are born so very visually different, it makes that all the more difficult to do.
Yeah. Yeah. This question harkens back to something I asked earlier, but like, in what ways would you like to see change in social consciousness? Um, because I'm remembering, I think the phrasing used was like, the world was built for people with hands and arms. And so, how would you like to see consciousness evolve? Um, so that the world could be a more welcoming place for someone who isn't?
What I really think is that people need to be open. And if they're open, I think consciousness can evolve in a way that's incredible. But people are so closed in and think that certain things should be the way they are, and they refuse to have a growth mindset. They refuse to see things from a different perspective. And with my messaging, How to Do New, it's just about being open to not seeing it that way. And it's really about being open to possibility, being open to understanding, being open with empathy and not pity.
Mm,
And if that can happen and people are willing to learn, which for some can be very hard, it means being vulnerable, it means um, being willing and open to learn. It can change, it can shift the world, I think.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, this might be another inappropriate question, but that's okay. Like, does it ever feel like a burden trying to be an inspiration for so many people?
I have to constantly just remind myself I just have to be the best version of myself. And we're only human. And so I can't put too much pressure on myself. I can't feel obliged to do it every single day because some days I don't feel like it. Some
Mm-hmm.
days I just want to go and do my thing and listen to music and do something on my own and just be in my own space because I'm only human.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't have the energy because it takes a lot of energy to be something for someone, to allow them to learn, to give them the space, which I try to do every day, but I'm only human. So sometimes I just have to do what I got to do to recharge.
Yeah.
And I think that that self-love and understanding is more than enough. And just to understand that we can only be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah. It's so well said. Another thing I think about a lot is I look for like the indicators that my battery is starting to run low, so I don't get to the point where my battery is drained and then I start acting like an idiot. Do you have like low battery indicators, either physically or mentally?
I like that you have that because not everyone has a system, and it's something I'm still trying to figure out myself. Because if we can't be, if we don't have ways of making sure to remind ourselves that we have we have to recharge our batteries, I think that we can really put just exhaust ourselves to a point of not serving others. And I have I know that for me it's energy related, and so for me, if I don't always have that energy, I just have to step back a little bit and rest because it takes a lot of energy to use my feet as hands all the time. And not only that, but to think through the processes of doing something in a different way constantly.
Mm,
And it takes me more time to do things. So that's all energy related in a way. And I have to find my outlets and in that balance.
yeah. Yeah. 100%. Um, do you have any superstitions or nervous sort of processes you go through before you get on stage?
Every time I go on stage, I always say a prayer because it reminds me to be grounded, and it reminds me that I'm not there for me. I'm there for others.
Mm,
And so as long as I can reframe myself and make sure I'm in that space, then it opens me up to being more vulnerable, to being more present. And I just have to every single time make that, could be just a couple seconds, but it's just making that intention so that I can go out on stage and be present with people.
yeah. And then what is your I use the term postmortem. I know not everyone does, but like, so you've just had an event and you do this all the time now, so maybe you do it less. But like, to what extent do you like watch game tape? Do you review what happened? Do you say like this went well, this didn't? I should update this. I should change this. Like, how much are you kind of like reviewing what happened to evolve what happens, versus kind of like you've been doing it enough that like I know what it is. I'm comfortable with the audience having different reactions because all groups of people are different. Like,
Yeah.
that was a jumble of questions, but I think you got where I'm going.
No. Oh, yeah, I totally get it. And so I probably could do more reflection on past videos. But again, how do I create that exact moment? It's hard to really put myself in the same space that I was in in that moment in time and being present, being vulnerable. So sometimes it's hard for me to critique a video. There are certain things I want to achieve. So I definitely ask people, what did they take away? What was the thing that spoke to them? What resonated with them? So that gives me a lot more feedback than watching a recording of myself, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Last couple of questions. You had mentioned this at the very beginning of the conversation. I'm going to be selfish here. I don't want to ask what advice would you give to speakers who are just trying out. I would say, like, what are 3 tangible things someone can do if they want to get on a stage?
3 tangible things that someone can do is first find their voice and their message, because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of competition in our world of speakers. Some people are there faking it till they make it. Some people are very as far away as from authentic as possible. So I think is really being in touch with yourself and your messaging. That's critical. And your why. Are you up there for the real reason? And then the second thing they can do is just start doing it. It could be small groups, big groups. It could be a group of friends when you hang out with friends. Just having experience. And then the third is putting together what you want to say and in an organized fashion. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time you go out there and speak, but having an outline and being open to anything that happens in the moment, but having a general outline of what you want to say and how you're going to convey it and the stories that go with what you're trying to say and convey, because stories convey messages more powerfully than stating, don't be afraid or something like that. A story that tells that conveys that in your life, because people will listen. And again, it's like everyone says, people remember how you made them feel, not what you said, but how you made them feel. And that's what stories do. They evoke a lot of feeling and emotion.
Yeah. As a storyteller, couldn't agree more. And then final question, like earlier I asked, like, just describe what it feels like to go from having never taken a flying lesson to having someone build you a plane. Like, what would you say to the middle school version of yourself who is kind of like in the thick of, I'm different and I hate feeling different and I don't know what to do about it?
Oh, if I could go back to my middle school self, I would definitely say, get over it. This is a gift and you're going to love every bit of it. Just get over yourself, I think I'd probably say.
Tough love.
And it's something I would definitely just really reassure myself at a younger age that things are going to be fine and they're going to work out for the good.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I so appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation very much, and good luck with all your events in New Jersey. And I hope the plane's amazing. I'm sure it will be, but I hope it's all you could dream of and more.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I appreciate it and what you're doing to put out there to reach people in a way that you do. And I got to hear more about the storytelling aspect sometime. Absolutely. I know now's not the time, but I would love to hear more about that and your insight into how storytelling is so powerful.
We'll keep the conversation going. I'd love that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica.
Okay.
So one of the questions we get asked all the time is, how can we be more supportive of artists? And sometimes that's actually consuming their art, whether it's buying tickets, streaming their music, watching their videos, etc. But frankly, buying their merch is one of the best ways you can. Our team has finally put together a small package of merch that we're really proud of. It's fun, it's bright, it's colorful. It really espouses so many of the messages that you hear on this podcast about self-love, self-appreciation, and being willing and courageous enough to put your art out into the world. So if you need a gift for yourself or for someone else, please go ahead and take a look. It's jackdawkinsmerch.shopify.com. Thank you so much for listening today. It is genuinely my pleasure, my joy to share these conversations with you. If you are able, if you're willing, please leave a review, hopefully a good one, on whatever platform it is that you're enjoying these conversations. It really helps us with visibility and having these stories be told to a wider and wider audience. There are many, many ways you can connect with us. The best one, just reach out to stagedivepodcast@gmail.com. You can recommend a guest, you can give us feedback, you can send us memes, whatever would make you happy. Thank you again for being here. My name is Jack Dawkins, and we'll see you again soon.